In this video we're going to talk about the Fujifilm X-T4. 3 months of use, my likes, my dislikes and my overall thoughts. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Florian, good to see your lovely faces. So guys, as mentioned a couple of months ago, I bought a Fujifilm X-T4. And if you haven't seen the video, I'm gonna link it up here, dive over, have a look and you will understand why I bought the Fujifilm X-T4. In this video we're going to talk about my likes, my dislikes, my overall thoughts about the Fujifilm X-T4 after 3 months of use. But before we dive into it, a little disclaimer beforehand guys. This video is not sponsored, so neither is Fujifilm paying me or anyone is paying me to say anything good or bad about this camera. I bought this camera from my own money because I wanted it, I wanted to try it out and see what the hype is all about. So with that out of the way guys, let's dive into it and we start off with the ergonomics from a Fujifilm X-T4. So the body weighs around 600 grams and is slightly thicker than the X-T3, which is absolutely fantastic because you got a bit deeper hand grip to handle your camera. So overall, the ergonomics are pretty much the same like the X-T3, X-T2 or even X-T1. However, the body got a bit slightly thicker and heavier, which is fantastic. You still got your alloy weather resistant body on top of it for harsh weather conditions or if you shoot out in a desert or similar situations. So the ergonomics are definitely fantastic. I do like this bit of heavier body. The body comes around in 600 grams with battery and SD cards. The X-T4 eventually got the flip out screen, which is absolutely fantastic right now if you want to use the X-T4 for vlogging or any sort of content where you see yourself. So having a flip out screen is definitely fantastic. As mentioned, having a flip out screen is fantastic, but not unlikely the XS10 where they excluded the mic jack from the other ports. You got now this floppy door hanging in front of your LCD, which sometimes can make it a bit hard to actually see what's going on at your screen. I wish they would have done it like a XS10 already back in the days and would have excluded the mic jack from all other ports. However, it is what it is and it's still not a big deal. You could take the floppy door off, that there is no door hanging around in front of your screen. As many other X series cameras, you got a dual card slot which can take up to UHS 2 SD cards. However, I'm personally using a UHS 1 card and I need to say the transfer speed is absolutely fine. Let's say you would have around 20 gig worth of footage and it takes around 10 minutes or up to 10 minutes to transfer the footage from a SD card down to your computer. So walking around with a UHS 1 card compared to a UHS 2 card is definitely doable. You can record up to 200 megabytes with the UHS 1 card, or if you would shoot with a UHS 2 card, you could record up to 400 megabytes per second, internally 4K with this camera. The battery life definitely was a huge improvement compared to the old battery. It's almost twice the capacity now, and quite frankly, if you would go out just taking pictures, I'm pretty sure you would last with one battery for the day now instead of 2 or 3 batteries like with the X-T3. However, when doing filming or you mainly film with the X-T4, the battery life is decent and lasts around 2 to 3 hours in my personal usage. And I needed to change a battery maybe once or twice in a day or a full day of filming. So the battery life is definitely a huge improvement compared to the X-T3. But also the switch dial now from movie mode to still mode is definitely a very handy option to have. And the good thing is if you switch between still and movie mode, your settings will be changed. So this means you can switch between movie and still mode without worrying you need to program your camera anew, or when you switch back you need to change your settings again. It will save your settings between movie and still mode and also will adjust the menu between movie and still mode and will take a lot of things out you don't need in a movie mode or you don't need in a still mode from a movie mode, if this makes sense guys. So definitely very handy to have, and it's very easy to switch between still and movie mode now. One button, you switch, your settings are saved, you just press the record button and you're good to go, you're ready. The button layout is pretty much the same like X-T3. In general, you got plenty of customizable button, which is fantastic. So there's plenty of choice to make the camera work for your needs, and you can program your buttons as you like them, what you want, where you want. The biggest upgrade from X-T3 to the X-T4 was definitely the Ibis. 6.5 stops with selected lenses. I still need to say that prime lenses still work slightly better than zoom lenses with OIS. So having a good prime lens, you definitely get 6.5 stops stabilization out of the X-T4. However, even with stabilized lenses, you get a very good result out of it. Yes, of course, sometimes the Ibis wobbles a bit or depends on a lens. Like as an example, if you take a 10-24 at 10mm, you still can see some wobbles in the corners, but this is not a big deal. If you know this, you can walk around this, or you make sure if you would use the X-T4 with the 10-24 for vlogging, you could hold it with your hand and you will get a slightly more stabilized image, or you even can stabilize it in post. You crop a bit in and stabilize it even further in post if you need to. However, the Ibis does a very good job, and I've been surprised how stable the footage can look like straight out of camera. The menu layout is Fujifilm's classic layout we know since years. So if you're a Fujifilm shooter already, you will have no problems finding things or changing settings. If you're new to the Fujifilm X-T lineup or the X series in general, it might take you a few minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe, to go through the menu and figure the menu out. I personally think that Fujifilm's layout is very customer friendly and broken down into the topics of filming, still images, IQ, or whatever you're looking for. Therefore, I don't think it's a big hustle to get used to the menu, and a few clicks and you will find what you're looking for. You change your settings and you're ready to go, ready to use the camera. You got your settings, what you're looking for. So I think Fujifilm's menu layout is very customer friendly compared to other brands. One thing I really enjoyed from a Fujifilm X-T4, but also back in the days already with the XS10, that they added the F-Log assistant. So this means in the summertime we all want to shoot F-Log to get the most dynamic range, to preserve our highlights, preserve our shadows, or don't crush the shadows. And they added the option of seeing a Rec 709 screen. So basically you shoot your F-Log, but you see a colored picture on your LCD screen, and you can adjust your settings towards it, but you get the full dynamic range of F-Log, which is fantastic. I wish they would have added it to the X-T3, and I probably would still film mainly with the X-T3 if they would have added F-Log to it as well. Potentially will come at some point with a firmware update or software update, but right now the X-T4 and XS10 having both the F-Log assistant, which is very handy and can help you a lot in certain moments. Let's talk about image quality and megapixel. You get 26 million pixel in a crop sensor, APS-C CMOS 4 sensor, and I think that 26 million pixel is plenty of resolution for a lot of people. If you think about the Sony a7S Mark III, this camera just got 12 million pixel and got a very good low light resolution. So I hope when they're planning or working on an XH2, they're gonna reduce the million pixel a bit to make sure we even get a better low light resolution. The low light resolution from an X-T4 is great and there's nothing wrong with it, but I don't use it as much in low light as I use it on a daytime or in here. So I can't tell you too much about the low light situation, but so far what I have seen when I took a few snaps, they've been absolutely fantastic. So therefore 26 million pixel is plenty of resolution for a lot of people. Let's talk about video specs. So the X-T4 can shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second without crop, 60 frames per second with a crop of 1.18, and I think having a 4K camera up to 30 frames per second without crop, or even up to 60 frames per second with the additional crop of 1.18 is fantastic. Right now, if you think about the price point of the X-T4, which costs around 1,500 pounds here in the UK, and having this package is definitely great, and having the resolution already in a crop sensor camera is fantastic to have. You can crop in down to a full HD picture and you won't lose any resolution. The camera can also shoot 120 frames per second and up to 240 frames per second. Whilst I think that the 240 frames compared to the 120 frames look a bit mushy compared to the 120 frames per second. However, I'm personally happy to shoot 120 frames per second. Sometimes I can bump it up to 240 frames per second if needed, but I think the quality I get out of 120 frames per second is better than the 240 frames per second. However, there might come a firmware update, software update again, guys, which they're gonna improve the quality of a 240 frames per second slightly, but so far, having the option 120 frames per second or even up to 240 frames per second if you wanted to is a handy benefit to have. So a lot of people say, are you able or can you trust the Fujifilm's autofocus? So all my videos been shot either on a Fujifilm X-T3, X-T4 or back in the days on a Fujifilm X-S10, and I never had really big issues with the autofocus. I did switch my custom settings slightly and bumped up the sensitivity and the tracking speed +2 each, and I think that the autofocus from a Fujifilm is very reliable, and if I just hold the camera up, the camera is in focus and it jumps back to my face. I hold the camera up again, it's in focus. So I think that a price point of 1,500 pounds for the X-T4, the autofocus is decent. Of course, it might be not the same quality like a Sony cameras with their eye autofocus, but this camera costs also a few more grand than a Fujifilm X-T4. Therefore, if you would start out and you decide, okay, I'm going with the Fujifilm X-T4 instead of Sony, you're definitely going to be happy with it. But also you can tweak your autofocus settings, your custom settings, or even at the end of the day, if you need to, you can shoot manually as well. So the autofocus settings are definitely good, and I didn't have many issues to hit focus or to film my subject when my subject been walking in front of me, to keep track on this person. So therefore the autofocus I think is reliable, good. Of course, it could be always better, but it's good for what it is. So my overall thoughts about the Fujifilm X-T4 is fantastic. I do like a bit of a bigger body. It's alloy, weather resistant, it's a bit more heavy, it gives you a nicer feel in the hand. You got a dual card slot, you got a switch button between still and movie mode. You got 4K up to 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second with crop, 120 frames per second and 240 frames per second slow motion. You got a well all-rounder in this camera. The image quality is great, the footage you get out of this camera is absolutely fantastic. And there are just a few bits I just don't like, such as like a door which flaps in front of your LCD. So overall, I'm very pleased with this camera so far, and there's really not much I can complain about it. So guys, if you really would think to switch to the X-T4, I think it's an upgrade mainly for video and not for pictures. I prefer the X-T3 for photography rather than videography. And with that said guys, that's my review on my first 3 months with the Fujifilm X-T4. I'm gonna do a long-term review at some point at it as well, but then it's probably another 6 months before I'm gonna do so. And I hope you liked this video. If you got any question, let me know in the comments. And with that said guys, like, comment and subscribe, and I'm gonna see you, my friend, very soon in another video. Cheers guys.